Europe's debt crisis has intensified a global slowdown, dragging economies down around the world. On the horizon, a commodities crisis. That's according to our next guest, who says it will further impact the global economy. Dambisa Moyo is an economist and author of Winner Take All, China's Race for Resources and What It Means for the World. Dambisa, welcome.
Thank you.
Now, before we get to China, we need to focus on the economy at hand, the European sovereign debt crisis. All weekend long, our focus was on Spain, and now we're turning our attention to Italy. What has you most concerned in Europe right now?
Inaction. There's way too much uncertainty still. As you could see yesterday, the markets initially rallied on the back of uncertainty being cleared up, but it was very clearly and very quickly reversed as people turned around and thought, well, actually, you know what? There's still very fundamental issues here that have not been addressed. The fact that the fiscal story is not clear, the fact that we have no idea what capital regulations will look like, and that story is still unfolding, I think means that there's too much uncertainty in the Eurozone.
Does it surprise you that the market has such knee-jerk reactions and you see a quick positive turn after news and then it trails again? Do you feel as though the market is ignoring fundamentals?
No, I think they are to some extent. But however, at the same time, you get these tick-ups and basically reacting to tactical information. Oh my gosh, there's new regulatory information, there must be something positive happening, and then people go back to the fundamentals and say, actually, nothing is happening. It's still the same old story.
Well, between Europe, we know the jobs concerns here in the U.S., and the third leg is China. Do you believe China's quest for resources will leave U.S. the loser here?
Well, fundamentally, the strategies are very different. The Chinese have adopted what I call a symbiotic approach to securing resources. And this is a very different approach from the U.S., which has tended to be quite unilateral, using military incursions to get resource access. And in that sense, I think that the Chinese will continue in a very sort of symbiotic and a friendly manner to acquire resources. I think it also very much behooves the world that China has adopted this approach. I mean, of course, she's able to do that because she's got vast sums of wealth, but she has a lot of structural problems, as we know, which to me basically provide a floor for commodity prices and suggest that prices will continue to rise.
But does there need to be a set winner and loser here? Now more than ever, it is apparent that our economies are interconnected and we're truly a global economy. Does having a winner and a loser hurt us?
Well, yes, it does. I do think that this whole zero-sum game has led to an environment where commodity prices have been rising over time. However, unfortunately, because of the European crisis, we have seen a rise in protectionism, the sentiment of a schism emerging between countries, especially the emerging world versus the more developed world, to me seems to be something that will continue to be a characterization of the world as we move forward.
Why do you see commodity demand skyrocketing in China?
Well, fundamentally, it goes back to demand and supply. The reality of the situation is, regardless of what we're seeing tactically, the softening and the weakening of the Chinese economy, we know that demand pressures will continue. The rise of the wealth in the emerging markets, global population continuing to rise, the increases in urbanization simply cannot be met by the finite supply and depleting supply of land, water, energy, and minerals.
Can we walk through the economic dynamics around specific commodities in China? Let's start with natural gas.
Sure. Well, so natural gas is a great one because in the United States there's so much discussion now about how the United States will be energy efficient and independent, basically because of what we've seen in natural gas. We've seen natural gas go from around $15, $16, plummeting down to $2. I think that there's a lot in that story, but as you know, it's difficult to transport natural gas, and I think fundamentally that story doesn't really work and translate in terms of where global prices and global pressures will continue to emerge.
How about oil?
Oil, very similar story. You've got shale gas. People are very optimistic about the supply coming online. I still believe, if you look at the facts right now, we still are consuming oil that was discovered in the 1950s. To me, even with all the euphoria around these new technologies, I still fundamentally believe that we do not have enough reserves, enough oil to supply the demand that is coming on stream.
How about coal?
Coal, I'm much more optimistic. I think the one that, to me, the thing that is much more interesting is copper, more than coal. Although coal obviously is an energy resource, China is very heavily dependent, leader of coal consumption. But to me, the thing that China remains short, and I think will continue to see a lot of pressure on, is copper.
China's rate cut last week, a surprise to you?
Not really. I mean, I think we're going to see much more intervention, much more of a stimulus package coming from China. Again, if you look at their economic story, they're now, the worst case estimates around 7.5% economic growth for them. That is not great. It's still not the end of the world. I think if it gets below 6%, that will be a serious problem. And so we know what the Chinese government are going to do. They're going to act. And I think we'll see a lot more of a stimulus coming from them.
But you're a woman who truly knows China. How forthcoming do you believe their government really is? When we see a rate cut like that, are they showing us their full hand, or is this just the first shoe to drop?
Oh, I think it's the first shoe to drop. But again, I don't think it's some big mystery. We know that they have a political imperative to continue to deliver economic growth for their population. They've got 1.3 billion, 1.4 billion people, 400 million people that live like us, 1 billion who are still living in economic poverty, dire poverty, and they have to deliver. Otherwise, they will have a political crisis.
Well, Dambisa, when it comes to knowing China, our viewers know to go to you. Our thanks to Dambisa Moyo, economist and author of Winner Take All, China's Race for Resources and What It Means for the World.